Good morning, everybody. It's Bear with BearIndependent.com, and this morning, or this evening when you see this, we're discussing Physical Security Part 2 in our Back to Basics series of videos here. We covered in Physical Security Part 1 the fact that you need people and you need to be aware of what it is that you're trying to physically protect in the first place. In Part 2, we're going to cover two key columns, lines of effort: observation and Overwatch. A lot of people get wrapped around the axles with things like this for physical security. And yeah, you need a handgun and you need to know how to use it. You need to be able to deploy it effectively in a moment's notice. That is not the pinnacle of physical security. There's a lot more that goes into physical security other than being able to deploy your weapon when you need it. Frankly, if we've gotten to the point where we need to deploy our weapons, we've done a bad job at everything else in physical security. So today, discussing observation and Overwatch. Observation allows us to gather intel. Okay, what is intel? Intel, the loose description, the loose definition that we use here is information that is independently verifiable. So I didn't just hear it from you. I can corroborate what I heard from you with somebody else, at least one somebody else, if not more, because what does it say in this book? In the mouths of two or three, let everything be established. So it's got to be at least in the mouth of two or three to be intelligence. And that doesn't mean, for example, that the Associated Press wrote a story and then CNN, MSNBC, and ABC all picked the story up and therefore it's corroborated. No, they are repeating the same information. Okay, so you have to be aware of the source. You have to assign certain credibility to the source, and that depends on you and who you are and what you believe. But intel has to be independently verifiable, and it has to be actionable. We have to be able to do something with it. Now, in many cases, we have these nuggets of information that we just squirrel away. We hide them away until later when they become actionable, when we have the ability to act on them. But at least for our purposes today, we could say that intel should be potentially actionable. It may not be actionable in the context of this situation on the ground right now, but we may need to grab that nugget, examine it, and then deploy assets against that nugget at some point. Okay, so independently verifiable and actionable. Now, a big part of this is doing your area study. If you want to talk about physical security against what? Against who? If you haven't done your area study, you should. Sam Culper at forwardobserver.com, on Instagram, on YouTube, Forward Observer, has a number of videos on how to do an intel study. An area study. And I recommend that you do them because you're going to have a much better idea of the area that you're operating in and who you're operating with and who you're operating against. And then once you have that benchmark established, you can update those things as the situation changes, because life is a full contact dynamic sport. So things don't stay the same. Okay, so you need to have an area study done to know, for all intents and purposes, who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, where are they, what type of regular, irregular, and natural threats exist where you are, and what type of resources are in your area that you can deploy against those threats, because you're observing, gathering intel, and therefore that allows you to be proactive rather than reactive. Okay, rather than having to react, some bad dude kicks your door in and starts gotta. Oh crap! Bang, 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 bang. Wouldn't it be nice to know that bad dude's coming with his AK a mile away, 10 miles away, 6 weeks away? Observation and Overwatch. Okay, So with observation, we're gathering this intelligence. We're comparing that intelligence against our area study. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? What does the battlefield look like? We're compiling this intelligence, again, making it actionable. We're sorting it in such a way. Who does this? Within your group, who does this? Phenomenal question. Who's your intelligence officer? Do you have a group? I know. Do you have a group? Who's your intel officer? And then you're communicating that intel to who? Okay, so you're gathering it, you're comparing it against your area study, you're compiling it into actionable intelligence, and then you're communicating that intel to who? Well, to your leadership, for sure. Whoever it is that has executive authority over this thing that we're doing, this, all the monkeys and all the circus. Whoever is the ringleader of all the monkeys in the circus, that person, he, she, him, sure, it, flurry, whatever, right? The person in charge. You may also be communicating this, depending on what your chain of command looks like, which means that you have to have a chain of command, which means you have to have people. Remember part 1 of physical security. You may also be communicating this to the director of your security forces. Hopefully you have enough people to have dedicated security forces. We touched on this in part 1. If we have 4 people, everybody's on security. If we have 40 people, not everybody needs to be on security all the time. Everybody needs to know how to be on security. Everybody needs to understand our quick reaction drills. Where do we go if somebody busts through the back fence with a striker? Or if there's a trespasser on the North 40 up there hunting deer? Or there are shots fired coming from an unknown location, unknown direction, what do we do? So everybody should be trained. This is the militant farmer concept. Everybody should know how to work a rifle. Everybody should know how to work a shovel. But not everybody needs to work a rifle or a shovel full time when you have a critical mass of people allowing you to engage in specialized labor, meaning that you have dedicated security forces. So you're communicating your intelligence to your command, whatever the command element is, as well as your security forces. Now, getting back to that militant farmer concept, those that are the security forces, we'll say it's 20% of your crew, you got 40 people, that's 8 people, right? The other 32 people function as an auxiliary. You may have within those 32 people another 8 people that are not quite full-time security, but they're pretty squared away. That's your QRF, your quick reaction force, okay? That if the security forces get jammed up, they can radio, because you have a commo guy, right? Or commo guys or girls, right? I have, just truth in advertising, during the course of this video, a booger has slid from the top of my nose to the bottom of my nose, and it's driving me nuts. It's driving me nuts. I could pause this video and do something about it, but I hate editing videos and having to splice the two of them together. So, yeah, we're just gonna have to deal with it, right? All right, so your QRF and your auxiliary. Say you got 8 people that's your dedicated security forces. You've got another 8 people, another 20% that are engaged in something else daily. They're the camp cook, they weed the garden, they take care of the livestock, they're a carpenter, whatever. They're your IT guy, whatever. But if things go bad, they function as the support element, the QRF, for the security forces. Now we've piled 16 guys onto the problem. Or have we? Because you should never commit the entirety of your forces, but that's a whole nother thing. Then everybody else who can man a rifle, should man a rifle, this is your auxiliary. Now of those remaining 24 people, some of those people are gonna be children. They're not manning a rifle, so let's say we're down to 16 people. Okay. Well, we've got another 16 people. They may be grandma. They may be the young wife who's pregnant. They may be, they're not our war fighters. But they can run a rifle if they need to. They should know how to run a rifle in case they need to. Okay, so as far as security forces are concerned, dedicated security force, then your QRF element, and then your auxiliary. This is why we have this militant farmer concept, which, by the way, is straight up scriptural. It's straight up biblical for those who are into that sort of thing. This is in the book of Genesis, right over here. Where is it? Genesis 2, verse 15. And Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. To work it and to guard it. A shovel and a rifle. Militant farmer concept. Okay, Genesis 2, verse 15. So within your security forces, getting back to physical security, observation, and Overwatch, we want to have early warning capability. We don't want to be dealing with the problem the moment it comes to us. So the farther out we can see, the farther out we can hear, the more time we have to react to a problem. Within this, there are a lot of people, especially when you use the term Overwatch, that delve into the idea of a sniper fantasy. Well, I'm just going to hang back here with my Mosin Nagant or my 300 Win Mag or my 270 deer rifle or whatever. And when they get within 1,000 yards of me, I'm going to kill them. Maybe, maybe not. You won't do that very long, very successfully. Snipers are part of joint operations. They typically, not always, but typically, work with teams of boots on the ground, as well as motorized units, mechanized units, so forth and so on. There's a whole lot that goes on there, other than one dude underneath a ghillie suit laid up somewhere taking shots at people. Snipers, believe it or not, are also in very good shape, and they have a lot of discipline to lay perfectly still for as long as it takes to get the shot off. That's different and requires a lot more of somebody than setting up essentially a hasty ambush with a designated marksman. So, to say nothing of the legality, okay, why are we shooting somebody 1,000 yards away? That's a whole nother video for another time. In fact, one that was recently addressed on Patreon. But why are we shooting somebody 1,000 yards away? And do you have the mental, emotional, spiritual fortitude to be bodying people at 1,000 yards away, let alone the skill? That's another thing. It takes a lot of skill to shoot something this big, let alone something this big, at 1,000 yards. There's a lot of people who think they can do it. There's not a lot of people who can. So beware the sniper fantasy in yourselves and within other people in your group as well. It is precision fire at great distance is applicable to security. It's not the only thing. And most of the people who talk a big game about it are terrible at it, in my experience. Most, not all, but most. Which brings us to, what are your marksmanship requirements for your security forces? Okay, observation and Overwatch. If we deploy our security forces, can they shoot the bad guys, not each other? Can they hit a paper plate at 50 yards with their rifle every time? Can they hit a paper plate at 10 yards with their pistol every time? Why a paper plate? They're cheap, they're available, and they're about this big. That's why. Or about this big. That's why. So if you have to make that shot, can you? Every time. It's a good basic marksmanship standard for a mutual assistance group. It's what we use. And getting back to that sniper fantasy, can you drill the paper plate with your 300 Win Mag at 300 yards, 5 rounds, no misses, and honestly, at 300 with your sniper rifle, your group should be no bigger than this. No bigger than that. That's about 3.5, maybe 4 inches. So you got a 1 minute of angle gun. Yeah. So, But you should certainly be able to hit a 10-inch paper plate with a 1 minute of angle gun at 300 yards. That's 3 inches in either direction. So you should have, your max dispersion would be 6 inches at 300 yards. And it should be much tighter than that. Otherwise, you have a sniper fantasy. Okay, so you don't want to fight a war at your mailbox, which means you need standoff capability, which means you need to have the ability to observe and gather that intel and compare it against your area study, compile that intel, and then communicate that intel to whatever your command and control element is, and also your security forces, so that your security forces aren't having to fight off the bad dudes at your mailbox. Okay, we would rather take them down the road or 2 towns over, or, you know, when they try and cross this creek or whatever. Okay, distance equals time, and time equals the ability to be proactive rather than reactive, or to react more effectively because we have a better understanding of the environment. We have a better understanding of what it is that's happening. We're not just immediately going to guns and starting shooting and trying to figure out in the moment what's happening. Nature abhors a void. Someone must control the battle space. That someone should be you. The more ability you have to observe, and the more ability you have to correlate those observations, and the better coordinated and trained your security forces are, the better you will be able to control the battle space. Lastly, getting the battle space, engendering goodwill amongst your community and in your operating area is highly recommended. You don't want to just be the thugs with guns. You want to be the benevolent, strong people in your operating environment that people know, I'm your best friend, please don't make me your worst enemy, because together we're going to have a much better chance of surviving whatever it is that comes. You want people to be allied to you. Will there be people that aren't? Of course there will. Will you perhaps have to deal with the negative ramifications of that? Of course. But you want as many people allied to you as possible, which gets all the way back to the beginning of physical security part 1. You need people, and you need to be able to feed those people. So it's not just pew, 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 pew. It's what's for dinner, honey. And if the answer is cold water and warm air, you're gonna have a hard time getting people to support you in the long term. But if the answer is rice and beans, even if all it is rice and beans, starving to death versus not starving to death, I'm gonna go with not starving to death, okay? And all this other stuff, you can't gather intel if you can't eat. You can't do your area study if you can't eat. You can't communicate that intel to your security forces if you can't eat. And you can't fight effectively if you haven't eaten in a while. So all of the tactical pew-pew, multicam, all that stuff, it's great. Believe me, tremendous, whatever. But it starts with food security. And then as we progress past that into our people, physical security part 2, observation and Overwatch. Again, to reiterate, gather intel, compare that against your area study, which should already be done. Forward observer, Sam Culper. Compile that intelligence, communicate that intelligence, and this is important, communicate that intelligence to those that need to know it. It can't just live in your head. It has to get out into the ether of your organization. Communicate that intelligence to your command and control elements and or your security forces. Designate security forces, then designate a QRF, and then understand who is the auxiliary, who's coming to help if we get in a really big jam. Eliminate the sniper fantasy and establish marksmanship requirements for your people. All right, I've got to pick this booger. I want to thank you all for being here. I've got a lot of people who have been reaching out saying, hey Bear, we love you, man, what can we do to help? Pray over Grindstone Ministries in 2021 and our mission there. And I would love it if you'd use promo code BearNation to pick up a Bear Fac or anything else from the store at bearindependent.com. That helps us pay our bills and feed our families. So we appreciate y'all deeply. Shout out to the patrons. We would not do this without you. If you'd like to support the show, click the baby bear. That helps us tremendously. Stay blessed, y'all. Shalom.